"You're choosing yourself over your own grandchildren," she said, like I had committed some unforgivable crime. All I did was tell her I couldn't watch the kids for a week. I was scheduled for a heart procedure on Monday. But apparently, needing to take care of my own health meant I was no longer worthy of being their mother. I was standing in my kitchen when the call came through. The late October sun was slanting through the blinds, casting long shadows across the counter where I had just finished wiping down the coffee maker. My daughter Rachel's name lit up the screen. I hesitated before answering. She only called when she needed something these days. "Hey, Mom," she said, skipping right past any greeting. "Kevin and I have that conference in San Diego next week. We need you to take the kids, Monday through Friday. We'll pick them up Saturday morning." I told her no as gently as I could. I explained that I had a cardiac ablation scheduled for Monday morning, that the doctor had been very clear about needing rest afterward, that I wouldn't be able to chase after a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old while recovering from a heart procedure. There was silence on the other end, then sharp and cold. "Wow, okay. I guess you're choosing yourself over your own grandchildren. That's really nice, Mom." I felt it like a slap. I opened my mouth to speak, to remind her of everything I had done over the years, the wedding I helped pay for, the down payment I contributed to, the countless nights I spent rocking her babies when she was too exhausted to get out of bed. But I didn't say a word. What was the point? "I just didn't expect this from you," Rachel continued. "We really needed you. I don't know what we're going to do now. Kevin's mom is on a cruise. We can't just cancel the conference." "You could hire someone," I said quietly. "There are agencies." "A stranger with my children? Are you serious right now?" I didn't respond. She hung up without another word. 2 hours later, I received a text message. Not a phone call, a text. "We've decided we need some space from this relationship. Please don't come to the house until we reach out. We've changed the security code." I read it twice, then 3 times. I thought my eyes were failing me, that maybe the medication was playing tricks on my mind. But the words stayed the same. Changed the security code, like I was some kind of threat. Like I was a stranger trying to break in rather than the woman who had rocked her through chickenpox and helped her with every math assignment she ever cried over. I drove to their house anyway. Call it instinct, call it denial. The streets of suburban Columbus looked the same as always. Neat lawns, basketball hoops and driveways, American flags drooping in the windless afternoon. But something had shifted. Something fundamental. I parked across the street from the gray colonial I had helped them buy 3 years ago, the one with the red door Rachel had picked out because she said it reminded her of the house in her favorite childhood book. For a moment, I just stared at that door. It didn't open when I rang the bell. I waited. No answer. I rang again. Through the window, I could see Lily's pink bicycle leaning against the porch rail. Mason's little shoes were scattered near the welcome mat. Then I heard it. Footsteps inside. Quick, hushed voices. Someone moved past the front window, but no one came to the door. I tried the keypad. The code I had used for 3 years. 0715. Lily's birthday. The light flashed red. Access denied. She really had changed it. I walked back to my car slowly, like I was carrying something that might shatter if I moved too fast. I couldn't tell if I was shaking from anger or grief. Maybe both. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then I started laughing. Quiet, breathless, ridiculous laughter that came out in stutters and gasps. Because that's what it felt like. Like I had woken up in some alternate version of my life, where my daughter had decided I was no longer needed. Or worse, unwanted. Back home, I made tea and forgot to drink it. I wandered the living room, touching things as if to remind myself they were real. The finger paintings from Lily still hung on my refrigerator. "I love you, Grandma," in wobbly purple letters. A handprint turkey from last Thanksgiving. Mason's first attempt at drawing a circle, which Rachel had texted me with 3 heart emojis just 6 months ago. I sat down and stared at my phone. The text, The security code. You're choosing yourself over your own grandchildren. I had been there for them, hadn't I? The $18,000 I gave them for the wedding when Kevin's business was struggling. The $8,500 for the down payment when they couldn't quite qualify for the mortgage on their own. The $3,200 to fix Kevin's car last winter when he said they were between paychecks. The monthly grocery deposit I had been sending since Mason was born, just to help them get by. I didn't keep receipts. That's not why I did it. But the proof was everywhere, in their walls, in their cars, in their children. I picked up my phone and typed a message, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted it too. What could I possibly say? Nothing would sound right. Nothing would make them change that code back. I stood by the window as the streetlights flickered on one by one. I hadn't even changed out of the clothes I had worn to my pre-op appointment that morning. I didn't move until the clock struck midnight, and even then, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I moved through the house like a ghost. The silence felt heavier than usual. I didn't turn on the news like I always did. I didn't open the curtains. I didn't want the light. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a piece of dry toast and a cup of coffee that went cold before I could drink it. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked, but everything else had gone still. I stared at the empty chair across from me. The one where Lily used to sit with her juice box, legs swinging, telling me about her preschool friends. The one where Rachel would collapse after a long day, sighing like the world owed her something for surviving it. How had I ended up here? How had I raised a daughter who could lock me out of her life with such ease? At noon, I opened the small wooden box where I kept all the little treasures they had given me over the years. A pressed flower from Lily, a photo strip from Rachel's college graduation, both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember anymore. A thank you card from Kevin after Mason was born. The handwriting was rushed, but it said, "We couldn't do this without you." I sat with that line for a long time. Apparently, they figured out how. My phone buzzed, and I jumped. But it wasn't Rachel. It was a reminder about my procedure on Monday. I set the phone down and pushed it away. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the old accordion folder from the bottom drawer of my desk, the one labeled Family in faded blue ink. Inside were records I had kept, not for leverage, not out of resentment, but because I was an accountant by trade and by nature. I recorded things, not the small favors, not the sleepless nights driving across town at 2 a.m. when Lily had an ear infection, not the weekends I gave up to help them move, paint, organize, but the financial things, the big ones. The obligations I had taken on because no one else could. The $18,000 for the wedding, the $8,500 for the down payment, the $3,200 for Kevin's car, the $2,100 for Lily's emergency room visit when their insurance lapsed, the $1,800 for the new water heater they couldn't afford, the monthly deposits that added up to over $14,000 across 4 years. None of it was given with strings attached. I had the means. I had the love. That was the role, wasn't it? The giving mother, the reliable grandmother, the solid background figure who keeps everything running without ever asking for anything in return. But now, I was asking myself something for the first time. Who takes care of me? I looked around the house. No one else was here. No one was calling to check if I was okay. No one was asking if I had eaten, if I was sleeping, if I had cried myself raw the night before. I had. The grief wasn't loud. It didn't come in sobs or screams. It settled like fog in my chest, slow, suffocating, and impossible to explain to anyone who hadn't felt it. She changed the code. I whispered it out loud just to hear how absurd it sounded, like I was some reckless intruder instead of the woman who had held her hand through her first heartbreak, her first job loss, her first baby. I stood up. My back ached like it always did, but I moved with purpose. I walked to the bedroom and started looking for the business card I had tucked into my address book years ago. David Chen, estate attorney. I hadn't spoken to him since my husband Walter passed away 8 years ago, but he had handled everything with patience and dignity, and he had never made me feel like a sentimental old woman wasting his time. I dialed the number and waited. Chen and Associates. This is Dana. Hi. This is Margaret Holloway. I was a client of Mr. Chen's some years back. I'd like to make an appointment at his earliest convenience. There was a pause. Keys clicking. Yes, Mrs. Holloway. He can see you Thursday morning at 9. Would that work? Perfect. Thank you. She asked if I needed a reminder call. I said, no. When I hung up, something shifted in me. Not anger, not grief this time, but a strange, quiet clarity. Like I had picked up a piece of myself I didn't realize I had lost. I wasn't planning to sue anyone. I wasn't going to show up at their doorstep with documents and demands, but I needed to understand what I had built and what I had given away. Later that day, I pulled out the filing cabinet drawer labeled Financial. Inside were bank statements, tax returns, wire transfer confirmations. I hadn't looked at most of them in years. I flipped through until I found what I was looking for. The cosigner agreement. 3 years ago, when Rachel and Kevin couldn't qualify for their mortgage on their own, I had agreed to cosign. I remembered Rachel crying on the phone, saying they would lose the house they had already fallen in love with, that Lily had already picked out her bedroom, that they would be devastated. I had signed without hesitation. Now, I looked at the document with new eyes. No ownership stake, no decision-making power, just liability. Just responsibility for a debt that wasn't mine if they ever stopped paying. I found another folder. My retirement account statements. I traced my finger down the list of withdrawals. $1,500 here, $2,000 there, $800 for something I couldn't even remember anymore. All of it transferred to Rachel's account over the years. Just until Kevin's commission comes through, she always said. Just to bridge us until next month. I had never asked for any of it back, never even mentioned it. Somehow, asking to be repaid felt more shameful than giving it away in the first place. I sat in my chair holding the papers, letting them speak for themselves. I had helped them build a life, but I wasn't part of it. I remembered a conversation from last Thanksgiving. Rachel had been complaining about Kevin's mother. She always wants to be involved in everything, she had said, rolling her eyes. It's exhausting. I wish she would just back off and let us live our lives. At the time, I had nodded sympathetically. Now I wondered if that was meant for me too. That evening, I walked through my small house slowly, as if seeing it for the first time in years. Everything here had been chosen with care. The sage green walls Walter and I had painted together, the bookshelves filled with novels I had collected over a lifetime, the rocking chair in the corner where I had nursed Rachel through 100 childhood fevers. None of it expensive, but all of it mine. I stood at the window and watched the last light fade behind the oak trees. Somewhere out there, my daughter was putting her children to bed, maybe thinking about how she had finally set boundaries with her difficult mother. Well, two can set boundaries. I didn't sleep much that night again, but it wasn't the tossing, spiraling kind of wakefulness. It was quiet, focused, like something inside me had turned a dial, and I was finally tuned to my own frequency. By 6 in the morning, I was at the kitchen table with a pen, a legal pad, and the accordion folder spread out in front of me. I started making a list. Every major financial contribution I had made to my daughter's household over the past decade. Every check, every wire transfer, every emergency that somehow never got repaid. The numbers were staggering when I added them up. $67,340. $67,340. That's what I had given them over 10 years, not including the co-signed mortgage, not including the groceries I bought, the gifts I wrapped, the gas I spent driving to their house 3 times a week to help with the children. $67,000. And one no was enough to erase all of it. Thursday came faster than I expected. I put on my navy blue dress, the one I saved for important occasions, and drove to David Chen's office in the business district downtown. He looked older than I remembered, more gray at the temples, but his handshake was still firm and his eyes were still kind. "Mrs. Holloway, it's good to see you again. What can I help you with?" I sat down across from his desk and folded my hands in my lap. "I need to make some changes to my estate plan, and I need to revoke the power of attorney I granted to my daughter." He nodded slowly. "That's certainly within your rights. Can I ask what's prompted this?" I told him. All of it. The phone call, the text, the security code, the silence. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "I'm sorry, Margaret. That must be incredibly painful." "It is. But I'm done waiting for it to stop hurting. I need to make decisions." We spent the next hour going over documents. The power of attorney revocation was straightforward. One signature, and Rachel would no longer have the legal authority to make decisions on my behalf. The will was more complicated. Everything had been set up to go to Rachel, with trusts for the grandchildren. Standard arrangement for a widow with one child. "I want to change it," I said. "All of it." "To whom?" "My niece, Sophie Brennan. She lives in Vermont. She's my sister's daughter. She calls me every Sunday just to chat. She drove 14 hours last winter when I had pneumonia, just to make sure I was taking my medication." David nodded. "We can certainly restructure the estate to name her as primary beneficiary. It will take a few weeks to finalize everything, but I can have the initial documents ready by next week." "There's something else," I said. "I'm listed as a co-signer on my daughter's mortgage. Is there anything I can do about that?" He grimaced slightly. "That's trickier. You're legally obligated until the loan is refinanced or paid off, but you can send a formal notice to both your daughter and the lender that you wish to be removed, which puts them on notice and may pressure them to refinance." "Do it." He made a note on his legal pad. "Is there anything else?" "Yes. I want everything documented. Every contribution I've made, not as a weapon, just as a record. So if anyone ever asks why I made these choices, there's a clear answer." He nodded again. "I understand." When I left his office, the autumn air was crisp and clean. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk. I stood on the steps for a moment, breathing deeply. I felt lighter than I had in years. That afternoon, I called my bank. It took 3 transfers and 2 identity verifications, but I finally reached someone in the right department. "I need to cancel all recurring transfers to an account belonging to Rachel Holloway," I said, effective immediately. The representative hesitated. "All of them, ma'am?" "I'm showing several automatic payments. All of them." "May I ask the reason for the cancellation?" I thought about making something up. Financial restructuring, budget adjustments. But instead, I told the truth. "Because I've decided my generosity shouldn't come at the cost of my dignity." There was a pause on the other end. Then, quietly, "I understand, ma'am. I'll process that right away." After the call ended, I sat very still. The silence in the room felt different now. Not empty, not lonely, clean, like space I had finally reclaimed. The following week was strange. I had my heart procedure on Monday. It went well, the doctor said, textbook case, and spent the next few days resting, watching old movies, reading novels I had put off for years. No one called to check on me. Not Rachel, not Kevin, not anyone from their household. But on Thursday evening, my phone buzzed, Kevin's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Margaret." His voice was tight, professional, like he was making a business call. "We noticed some of the transfers didn't come through this month. Is everything okay with your bank?" I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "The transfers have been canceled." Silence. "Then, what do you mean, canceled?" "I mean I stopped them, all of them." Another pause, longer this time. "Is this because of the situation last week?" Look, Rachel was upset, but she didn't mean. She changed the security code, Kevin. She told me to stay away from my own grandchildren because I couldn't watch them while I was having a heart procedure. She was stressed. The conference was important. You know how she gets. I do know, I said. That's the problem. I've been making excuses for how she gets for 35 years. I'm done. His voice hardened. So, this is revenge? You're going to punish us financially because your feelings got hurt? No. This is me choosing not to fund a household that considers me disposable. You're being dramatic. Goodbye, Kevin. I hung up before he could respond. 20 minutes later, a text from Rachel. I can't believe you're doing this. You're tearing this family apart. I hope you're happy with yourself. I read it once, then set the phone face down on the table. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't sorry either. The days that followed were quiet. I went back to the library for the first time in months, not to volunteer, just to browse. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. I accepted an invitation to join my neighbor Barbara's book club, something I had been putting off for 3 years because I was always too busy helping Rachel. Barbara came over one afternoon with a casserole and a bottle of wine. She had heard, somehow, small towns talk. I'm not here to pry, she said, settling into my kitchen chair like she had never left. I'm just here to tell you that whatever you did, you probably should have done it 10 years ago. I poured us both a glass. She thinks I'm being cruel. She thinks you're being inconvenient. There's a difference. I laughed. It came out a little watery, but real. You know what my mother used to say? Barbara continued. She said, the people who get angriest when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited most from you having none. I sat with that for a long time after she left. The letter arrived the following week. Actual paper, actual envelope, Rachel's handwriting on the front. I recognized it immediately. She still made her R's with that little flourish she had learned in 4th grade cursive class. I held the envelope for 5 full minutes before opening it. Inside, 2 pages, blue ink, no greeting. Just a first line, like an accusation. I don't understand what I did to deserve this. I kept reading. She wrote that Kevin was furious, that the children were confused, that I had created chaos in their household at the worst possible time. She wrote that she felt betrayed, that she had always counted on me, that she didn't know who I was anymore. She mentioned the money, briefly. She said she was hurt, that I would use finances as a weapon. She suggested that maybe I was going through something. Maybe I was depressed. Maybe I should talk to someone. She didn't mention the security code. She didn't apologize for telling me to stay away. She didn't acknowledge that I had just had a heart procedure and no one in her family had bothered to ask if I was alive. The last paragraph. We're willing to forgive you and move forward, but only if you're ready to be part of this family again. Families make sacrifices. You taught me that. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I walked to the fireplace and set it on the grate. I didn't light it. I just didn't want it on my table anymore. A week later, the estate documents were finalized. I signed everything in David Chen's office, watched him notarize each page, and walked out with copies tucked neatly into my bag. Sophie called that evening. She was crying. Aunt Margaret, I just got the notification. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, sweetheart. But this is, I never expected. Are you sure? I'm sure. You've been good to me. Not because you had to be, just because you are. She was quiet for a moment. Then, thank you. I don't take this lightly. I know you don't. That's exactly why. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine, something I almost never did, and sat on the back porch watching the stars come out. I wasn't celebrating, but I was acknowledging. I had done something hard. I had told the world I would not be used anymore, not even by those I loved most. The voicemail came 2 weeks later. Grandma? It's me, Lily. I sat up straight, nearly spilling my coffee. Mommy doesn't know I'm calling. I took her phone when she was in the shower. I miss you. I miss your house and the cookies we make and the stories about when Mommy was little. Are you mad at us? Did we do something wrong? Mason says your name sometimes and Mommy gets really quiet. Can you please come see us? I won't tell anyone. I promise. Her voice cracked at the end. She didn't sound 5 anymore. She sounded older, older than she should have had to be. I listened to it 3 times. Then I saved it. I didn't call back right away, but I wrote her name on a notepad I kept by the phone. Lily. Not as a promise, as a beginning. Spring came slowly that year. I spent more time in the garden, planting bulbs I knew I might not see bloom, pruning bushes that had grown wild with neglect. The watercolor class turned out to be more fun than I expected. I wasn't any good at it, but neither was anyone else, and we laughed at our lopsided trees and muddy skies together. Sophie drove down from Vermont for Easter weekend. We made cinnamon rolls from her grandmother's recipe, my sister's recipe, and sat on the porch watching the rain. "Have you heard from Rachel?" she asked quietly. "Not since the letter." "Do you think she'll come around?" I considered the question. "I think she might. Someday, when she needs something no one else can give her." Sophie was quiet. "But it won't be the same," I continued. "I won't go back to being the person who says yes to everything because she's afraid that no will cost her everything. That person is gone." "I think that's healthy, Aunt Margaret. I think it's just honest." The phone call came in May. Not from Rachel. From a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Holloway? This is Principal Warren from Lily's school. I'm sorry to bother you, but we have a situation." My heart stuttered. "Is Lily okay?" "She's fine, physically, but she's been very upset today. She told her teacher she needed to call her grandmother. She was quite insistent. She said," the woman paused, "she said you were the only one who would understand." I was already reaching for my keys. When I arrived at the school, Lily was sitting in the front office, her backpack clutched in her lap, her eyes red from crying. The moment she saw me, she bolted from her chair and threw her arms around my waist. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I came." The principal explained that Lily had been having trouble at school lately. Her grades had slipped. She had been getting into arguments with classmates. Today, she had refused to participate in a group project and had started crying when the teacher tried to talk to her about it. She kept saying she wanted her grandmother, the principal said. We tried to reach her parents, but neither of them answered. I looked down at Lily, still pressed against my side. "Can I take her home?" The principal hesitated. "We typically need a parent's permission. I'm listed as an emergency contact. Check your records." She did. I was. In the car, Lily was quiet for a long time. Then, in a small voice, "Mommy and Daddy fight all the time now. Daddy yells about money. Mommy cries in her room. It's really scary." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. That must be very hard. Is it because of you? Because of the money stuff? Daddy said you took all the money away." My heart broke a little. "I didn't take anything away. I just stopped giving. There's a difference." She thought about this. "Why?" I chose my words carefully. "Because sometimes, when you give and give and give, people forget that you're a person too. They start to think you're just there to help them, and when you can't help one time, they get angry, like you were a machine that broke instead of a person who needed rest." Lily nodded slowly. "Like when I share my toys and then someone gets mad when I want one back?" "Exactly like that." We drove in silence for another few minutes. Then she said, "I don't think you're a machine, Grandma. I think you're the best person I know." I had to pull over because I couldn't see the road through my tears. I took Lily back to my house, made her grilled cheese and tomato soup, let her pick a movie. She fell asleep on the couch with her head in my lap, just like she used to when she was 2. An hour later, Rachel called. "Mom, you have my daughter?" "I do. The school called me when they couldn't reach you." Silence. "Then, I'll come get her. She's asleep. She's had a hard day. Why don't you let her rest, and we can talk about this tomorrow?" Another silence. Longer. "Fine." She hung up. The next morning, Rachel arrived alone. She stood in my doorway like a stranger, arms crossed, jaw tight. "I didn't ask you to pick her up. You didn't answer your phone." "I was busy. So was I. For 35 years. She flinched. I hadn't meant it to come out that harsh, but I didn't take it back. "Can we sit down?" I asked. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had written that letter I never sent, where I had added up $67,000, where I had decided to stop being a bank account with a heartbeat. Lily told me about the fighting, I said. Rachel's face tightened. She shouldn't have. She's 5. She doesn't know what she should and shouldn't say. She just knows she's scared. Rachel said nothing. I'm not here to judge your marriage, I continued. I'm not here to say I told you so. But I need you to understand something. What you did to me, changing the code, telling me to stay away, that wasn't setting a boundary. That was punishment. Because I couldn't help you one time. I was upset. You were inconvenienced. And you responded by treating me like I didn't matter. Her eyes glistened. That's not. I helped you buy this life, Rachel. The wedding. The house. The cars. The preschool tuition. I gave you everything I had, and the one time I needed something for myself, the one time I said I couldn't because I was having a medical procedure, you cut me off. A tear slid down her cheek. I didn't mean, maybe you didn't. But you did it anyway. And I've spent the last 6 months wondering what I did wrong, what I failed to teach you, how I raised a daughter who could throw her mother away so easily. She was crying now, really crying, not the performative tears I had seen so many times before. I'm sorry, she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment. My daughter, the baby I had held through colic and croup, the teenager who had screamed that she hated me and then crawled into my bed an hour later, the woman who had somehow become a stranger. I believe you're sorry it turned out this way, I said. I believe you're sorry the money stopped. I believe you're sorry Lily is struggling. But I'm not sure you're sorry for what you did to me. She didn't have an answer for that. I let the silence sit between us. Finally, I said, I love you. I will always love you. But I don't trust you anymore. And I'm not going to pretend that everything is fine just to make you comfortable. She wiped her eyes. So what now? Now, we start over. Slowly. On different terms. You don't get a key to my house. You don't get access to my accounts. You don't get to expect that I'll drop everything whenever you call. But you are my daughter, and Lily and Mason are my grandchildren. And if you want a relationship with me, we can build something new. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I don't know how to do that, she said. Neither do I. But we can figure it out, together, if you want to. She nodded slowly. Then she stood up and, for the first time in 6 months, she hugged me. Not the quick, performative hug of greeting or goodbye. A real one. The kind that holds on. I hugged her back. Lily appeared in the doorway, still rumpled from sleep. Her hair a tangled mess. Are you fighting? She asked. No, sweetheart, I said. We're just talking. Grown-up stuff. She patted over and wormed her way between us. Good. Because I don't like it when people fight. I kissed the top of her head. Neither do I. That afternoon, after Rachel and Lily left, I sat on my porch and watched the birds gather at the feeder I had put up last month. Cardinals, sparrows, a blue jay that chased everyone else away. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. How are you doing today, Aunt Margaret? Thinking of you. I smiled and typed back. Better than I've been in a long time. Thank you for asking. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if Rachel would really change, or if we would slip back into the old patterns, or if the fragile thing we had started to rebuild would hold. But I knew one thing. I had stopped leaving myself behind. And whatever came next, I would face it as a whole person, not as a machine that gives and gives until it breaks, not as a background figure who only matters when she's useful, but as Margaret, a woman with a heart that still worked, despite everything. A woman who had finally learned to say no. A woman who was, at last, home in her own life. If this story touched something in you, I want you to know, it's never too late to draw the line. To protect your peace. To start again on your own terms. Leave a comment if you've ever had to make the hard choice, and follow for more stories that speak the quiet truths we don't say out loud.